What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central Podcast, episode 79, where we are unfortunately going to recap the series that just occurred between the Mets and the Giants, where the Mets absolutely laid an egg. They have a series coming up against the Guardians, which we'll talk about. We got a lot to get into here, as always. It's going to be a very frustrating episode to talk about the way that this team has been playing baseball. You have teams like the Marlins that have been playing better than them since June 13th or whatever that date is that everyone keeps pointing to. But all I know is it's ugly. It's very ugly right now. Leave a like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, all that stuff. I don't want to waste any time. I want to get into the conversation here because I'm very frustrated. I'm sure a lot of Met fans as well, based on the comments in the live chat and the post game shows. I could tell you guys are frustrated. So I don't know where we begin, honestly, to tackle the multitude of issues that this team has at the current moment. I think the very glaring one is you look at this team offensively, and they've been doing the same things that they've been doing since April. And every time they do produce, like they did in game 2 of the series, we sit here and say, okay, that's great, but build on it. They did it against the Nationals. Okay, that's great. Build on it. They did it against the Yankees. Okay, that's great. Build on it. And the common theme in all of those games is they don't build on it. The top guys solely deserve I should say solely, they deserve the huge chunk of the blame because Juan Soto has been killing dirt worms all season long, pretty much. Francisco Lindor, while he had a better series, has been horrible. Brandon Nimmo, while he had a better series, has not been good enough. And Pete Alonso, while he had a couple moments in the series, has been horrible. And the bottom line is, you're not going anywhere if those guys do not step up. So you could sit here and tell me, tell Matt, tell any other Met fan, you could sit here and say, well, they should have done this at the deadline. They should have got another bat. And while that maybe would have helped, you're not going anywhere if the top guys don't show up, no matter what. It does not matter. The story ends there, and the conversation is left at that. Meanwhile, the hitting coach, the great hitting coach, is arguing with fans in Instagram DMs like he's 5 years old, instead of the issues actually being addressed and, maybe watching film on your own players and seeing where there could be improvement. And I want to paint to light, before I let Matt jump in, I want to paint to light what really shined to me as the moment that defined this offense in a nutshell, because it happened in this series, even though there are so many times where you could look back and point at certain moments. To me, there was one really defining moment of why this offense is as piss poor as it is. I want to take everyone to the 10th inning of game 1 of the series. Ronnie Mauricio comes to the plate with guys on base, and he took 2 fastballs right down the middle of the plate from a pitcher that he tanked a home run off of a bit ago. Why is that defining the moment, you might ask? Because this team is one of the worst fastball hitting teams I have seen in my life, and the stats back it up as well. So you have these guys going up there, not swinging at fastballs, and the hitting approach just seems to be, you know what? If they hang a bad pitch, then we'll jump on it. Otherwise, we're going to look to walk every time. And while walks are great, walks are fine. I'm not going to complain about a walk. They aren't doing that. So it's as simple as this. The only thing that I could sell you on for this being better, or whatever you want to say, if you will, is all you could do is hope and pray that once they get into the dance, if they even get to the dance at this rate, once they get into the dance, they all of a sudden figure it out. And if that's what happens, awesome. But we are in August. It is August 4th. I've seen enough to tell me that's not going to happen. I've seen enough to tell me that this offense is simply not good enough, at least in terms of production wise. I mean, they have the names to be good, but they're just not showing it. And it's simple as that. Matt, I'll let you jump in.
I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. Like everything is true. And listen, I said this during the second game of the series. Right after Kodai Senga gives up the lead to give the Giants a 4-3 lead. And listen, people might say it's reactionary, and go ahead. You can believe what you can. At the end of the day, it's all about opinions, and you know, what's it called? Credit to you if you think otherwise. After watching this team 4+ months of baseball, I don't think they're winning a World Series. And like I said, people might think that's a reactionary take, but I've seen, like I said, and this is not just saying this after one series. This is compiling a lot of evidence after 4 months, 4 months plus of baseball, and that's what because like with me, right? And I know people are different. I don't like to be reactionary. I don't like to come to a conclusion after one or two series. I like to build up a lot of evidence, a lot of statistics, and say, okay, after a certain amount of time, I'm comfortable with coming to this conclusion. And like I said, after 4 months of baseball, I don't think this team is good enough to win a World Series. And that's not me saying it because I don't think they're good enough skillfully. I think they have the tools skillfully to win a World Series. I think it's more the mental side of the game. I don't think they have it mentally in them. And we talked about this in the group chat, but I am comparing this team, and again, not skillfully because I think this team is more skillful than that group, but I'm comparing this team to the 2024 New York Rangers. And like I said, don't get me wrong, this Met team is more skillful than that Ranger team. And I know people say it's difficult because you're comparing baseball to hockey, but I'm just comparing the names and how much better they are than their other counterparts. But like that team, the biggest problem for them was mental roadblocks. And again, after 4 months plus of watching this team play baseball, mentally, I don't think they're strong enough. There's too many situations where, and listen, this team is so weird because when everything's firing on all cylinders, when they're playing well, when they're hitting well, when they're pitching well, cool. They get on these long winning streaks. We've seen them, go back a couple weeks ago. They just had a 7-game winning streak where they salvaged the final game of the Red Series. They then went on to sweep both the Angels and the Giants in San Francisco, 6 straight wins. They built up a 7-game winning streak. You take it back to about a month ago, back-to-back sweeps to the Nationals and Rockies, 6-game winning streaks. But what happens? They have one bad loss, and you can listen. And I was saying this before, but you can compare the first loss of that Tampa Bay Rays series and the first loss of that San Diego Padres series on San Diego. They're very similar. Mets both have big leads. Pitching fails, they buckle, they give up a huge lead, and then the next couple games after that, uncompetitive performances where the other team just simply runs away with it. And then the Mets get on these losing streaks. And listen, I get that they won the second game of the series, but even like what Evan just mentioned, like sure they had the offensive outburst, but was anyone confident that they were replicating, or not even replicating? Because I get it, it's unrealistic to ask for 12 runs every single game. But were they going to match that in any way possible? And when I talk about that, I'm talking about 5, 6, 7 runs and being at least competent with runs in scoring position. Because I certainly didn't. I know you didn't. And I know a lot of people in this chat didn't think so either. And again, that's not us being reactionary. That's building and looking at the evidence because, again, there's been plenty of times this season where, okay, this team does have a big offensive outburst or they, score 9, 8, 10 plus runs. But do they end up following? Do they end up following up that performance with another big offensive performance? No, I can maybe think of one time where they did it, and I think it was the final game of the National Series where they put up like 18 runs, and then I believe the first game of the Diamondback Series, I think they put up 7 runs. That's the only time I can remember this year where they had back-to-back days where the offense at least looked competent. But again, I'm looking at this at a huge sample size. They're just not doing it. So the mental side worries me. The fact that the offense worries me. I'm not so much worried about the pitching side, even though because again the bullpen's fine. I'm not worried about the bullpen apart from Ryan Stanek, which we'll get into him. because he's just been flat out terrible this year. The starting pitchers, they do concern me a little bit, but there is what's it called? There is at least safety cover of some of the young guys coming up and at least relieving and give you some extra innings. So that I'm not too much worried about, but they need to pick up their load. And then again, like what Evan talked about, the fact that you have this hitting coach, right, and Eric Chavez. The fact that he's more worried about fighting with people on Instagram and going back and forth with them instead of just actually doing his job, helping the players with their approaches when they go up the bat. Instead of actually scouting the opposing pitcher to let the guys know it's like, hey, this is what the opposing pitcher next start. This is what he likes to do. Early in the count. This is what he likes to go to late in the count. This is his go to swing and miss stuff. When he's like, when he's desperate and needs to get out of a jam, and instead he's going out there and he's fighting with people on Instagram, and it's like, it's mind-boggling. It's disgusting. It's unprofessional. Like, you are a professional employee of a Major League Baseball team. The fact that you're worried about fighting with people on social media, that's embarrassing. For me, I would fire you out on the spot because I don't have any time for that bullshit. You need to worry about what you're being paid for. And again, like what you brought up, and like we were talking about last night, but I'm pretty sure, because when I was watching the 2 episodes ago of the mets'd podcast, they talked about how the Mets are either bottom 3 or bottom 5 team in terms of batting average against fastballs. If that's not a philosophy thing, then I don't know what is. Because when you look at this lineup, the names that are in there and the amount of money they are making, the top 4 guys in this lineup are making just over $132 million a year. And this lineup is bottom 3, bottom 5 in fastball average. Like, that's just simply not good enough. And like I said, if anyone's telling me that's not a coaching thing, if that's not a philosophical thing, then I think you're just being delusional. Because at the end of the day, Eric Chavez should be fired, and we've been saying this throughout the whole year, but I don't know. Until it happens, until it happens. Like, we're gonna keep complaining about it, but it's just like it's the truth. He is such a big problem with this team, and I get it. Top guys need to show up too, especially with them making the most money. But coaching matters. Like, anyone who says that it doesn't, they're just flat out wrong. Coaching does matter.
Yeah. Like, another scenario too. I mean, how many times have we watched Brandon Nimmo take at bats where he's watching fastballs right down the pipe and not swinging at a single one? So, like, I pointed to the Mauricio at bat, but Brandon Nimmo does the same exact thing. And I'm so tired of hearing on the broadcast, at least once a series, Gary being like, well, Chavez has been talking about how this team's not doing a good enough job at hitting fastballs and they need to be better at that. That's like if you have an issue with your car and you bring it to the mechanic and the mechanic goes, yeah, there's an issue with your engine. We don't know how to fix it, but there seems to be an issue. Like, dog, you're the hitting coach. That guy's the mechanic. Like, you should be able to fix the problem. You're not doing your job. And I get that he's not the one swinging the bat up there, but don't you think maybe adjusting the approach to some degree would benefit them? I mean, the White Sox, I'm pretty sure, lapped them with runners in scoring position, unless the Mets brought themselves back up because of that game against because of game 2 in this series. That might have boosted them a little bit ahead. But after game 1, I know for certain they were bottom of the league. They were below the White Sox with runners in scoring position. Below the White Sox. This team is making what? The top guys, how much money combined are they making? They're making as much as what? The Walt Disney Company between the top 4 guys, Marte, McNeil. Those guys are making way too much money for them to be this bad with runners in scoring position. And it's not reactionary to sit here and say they're not winning a World Series because, again, we have to see a completely different baseball team over the next 2 months or in September or out of the gate in October in the playoffs. We have to see a completely different ball club than we have seen over the course of the months that we have of data. Based on what we have, yeah, this team's not winning a World Series. Unless, again, there's that magic switch, which I'm sure Eric Chavez believes in because he's a big Pixie Dust believer. Um, I don't know. I just don't know what you could do here because, again, they're not going to fire Chavez this late in the season. It's just I don't know what direction you could go in to fix this problem, and this is just who they are at this point. Like we are in August. We don't need to sit here and say, "Oh, but if." No, this is who they are. And in terms of the starters thing, you know what? Even if they were getting competent starting pitching, who the hell cares when they are not able to produce anything offensively? I don't care if they're losing 12-1. I don't care if they're losing 2-1. This offense is it's been the problem the entire year. And they didn't get good starting pitching in game 2, but they actually produced offensively to make up for it because believe it or not, you are allowed to win games because of your offense. I know that's a crazy concept to some, um, but you are allowed to win games because of your offense. And it has not happened enough this season. Again, I've broke it down. You've broke it down. We could count on probably one hand, maybe two hands at most, how many games they've won this year because of their offense. And since that June 13th date, they have 18 wins. 18 wins since that date. That is not good enough baseball. Could you imagine they were even playing slightly above 500? Like, imagine they had a 520 win percentage in that span. This team's running away with the National League right now. And that's what they should be doing with the caliber of offense they have. But it's just not happening. But then, again, to add salt into the wound, you're not getting the volume from the starting pitchers. Frankie Montas is a complete joke. And it's to the point where you have to call up one of these young guys in the starting pitching department. It is absolutely time. And I was listening to Evan Roberts on the Rico Bronet, and he was talking about how Wednesday's the perfect time to probably slot in one of these young guys because it lines up with their rest. You can move David Peterson back, who has not been good on regular rest, and then you could shift the rotation back another day for everyone involved. And then Frankie Montas could be in the bullpen where you don't need that sixth starter for a bit. What is the harm in doing it at this point? Because Clay Holmes isn't giving you the volume. And again, I don't blame him. He's running on fumes. It's so obvious. He has not thrown this many innings in his major league career. Kodai Senga, ever since coming back from injury, not giving you any volume at all. And then Frankie Montas, I don't need to say more. Your only other option is Paul Blackburn. And you know what? You might get the same as Montas production at this rate from him. So it's time to call up the young guys because outside of David Peterson and then Sean Manaea, I think we'll get there. Like we've talked about, we have to wait for it to happen though with the volume. But David Peterson is the only one giving volume. They put up that graphic on SNY since I think the June 13th date that we keep referring to. They've got 9 or 10 innings, somewhere between 9 and 10 innings from their starting pitchers in the 6th inning, while the bullpen's thrown almost 40 innings in the 6th inning in that span. It's a problem.
Yeah, listen, it's time. It's time to call up on these young guys. And listen, I get that Stearns wants to be patient with them. I get that he wants to build up. He wants to build them up, and he wants to marinate them to the point where they're fully ready. But there comes a point in time where it's like sometimes you just need that extra boost, and it's like, okay, kid, like get up here, show us what you can do. We've gotten to that point because. And listen, I get it. There's a chance that one of these two kids, either McLean or Sproul, come up here, and I know that technically Tong could come up here, but I don't think they want to rush him. I think they want to be extra careful with Tong just because they view him as a very important piece of the future. But in terms of McLean and Sproul, could they come up here and struggle? Absolutely, absolutely. We saw it with Brandon Sproul, dominated Double A, went up to AAA, hit that wall, struggled, and it's just recently out of the last 5 or 6 starts, he's really started to find his groove, his form, and he's been pitching well. McLean, on the other hand, went through AA relatively easy. Same with AAA. He really hasn't hit a wall. So listen, could McLean come up here to the major leagues and finally hit that wall? Sure, he absolutely could. But you know what? I'd rather see these young kids struggle who are making little to no money and at least they have potential and a future on this roster than watching Frankie Montas go out there and throwing batting practice. Because at least I know with the younger kids, at least they're getting experience with them. At least I know that they'll learn from these outings. What's Frankie Montas learning? That he's a shit pitcher and that, his time in the major leagues are pretty much almost up and that, he's basically, committing legal robbery with the New York Mets and stealing $34 million a year. Like, what's Frankie Montas have to learn? So, listen, like I said, like, sure, is it a risk calling up these two young kids? Absolutely. But you know what? Sometimes you have to take that risk. And I think it's time to at least call one of them up. Who will it be? Sproat or McLean? I don't know. If I had to make a guess, I think that see
I think Sprout.
it's tough who I think they would call up because I think they're worried about McLean hitting that roadblock in the major leagues. I don't think they want to take that risk with McLean yet. So I think they would be more willing to lean with Sproat just because at least in AAA he had hit that roadblock and he's shown that he could get past it. So I think probably Sproat is the one, and I think maybe he's at least a little bit closer to being called up. So I think probably they will end up calling Sproat. But then even then, just to build upon what I was saying about the mental block of this team, it sucks that I have to sit here and say that I think this team is not mentally strong enough to win. Just because, especially when you compare this team to last year, that team last year was so mentally strong, and this is not factoring the start of the year because that team was just terrible to start the year last year. But look at how many brutal losses last year's team had down the stretch. You could point to the final game of the Padres series where they're a couple outs away from taking that series 3-1. Boom, Jackson Merrill hits a walk-off home run to give the Padres the win. But what happens? They don't let that loss affect them mentally. They go out there, they win the first game of the Diamondback series. You go to the second game of the Diamondback series. Again, couple outs away from winning that series. What happens? Corbin Carroll steps up to the plate, bases loaded, walk-off grand slam. Kicking the ball's lost. What happens, though? Do they let that loss affect them mentally? Absolutely not, because the next day they follow that up. They win game 3. And let's not forget how important that game 3 win was, right? Because I know people say, listen, it's just one game. In that situation, it wasn't one game because you know why? Because that win decided whether they made the playoffs or not. Let's not forget that the reason the Mets won, the reason the Mets made the playoffs that year was because they had the tiebreaker over the Arizona Diamondbacks, and that tiebreaker was because they won that final game of that 3-game set. And again, like I said, it sucks that I have to sit here and talk about how mentally weak this team is because when you compare this team to last year's team, it's completely night and day. It's completely night and day. And listen, I get that people say like, listen, okay, it's August. Sometimes bad losses happen, but you know what? It's a bad sign for me when you let bad losses spiral because you know what? If you get into the playoffs and you have one bad loss, you can't afford to spiral because you know what? A 3-game losing streak, and boom, you're easily knocked out. You're easily out of there. So and again, like I forgot which episode this was, but this was maybe 3-4 episodes ago. At least when the Mets were going through that brutal stretch, where they got swept back-to-back series. But I remember James and Mark were talking about this on the Mets Up podcast, and even James brought this up that it seems like the Mets are playing tight, Mendoza's managing tight, and all this stuff. Well, hold on, why are you playing and managing tight? You're in a division race in the middle, and in this case, it's the middle of July, now beginning of August. You can't tell me you're playing tight when compared to last year, you were going down the stretch almost having to win every single game because of how far you buried yourself. If you're playing tight because of a division race where you at least have a 90% chance of making the playoffs, again, how could I sit here and say that this team is good enough to win a World Series? Because if that's the case, then mentally this group just doesn't have it.
Yeah, and I mean last year they had they had JD Martinez, who did more of the hitting coaching duties than the actual hitting coach, which I think also helped. But and I talked about this with Steven, our friend of the show here, as I was leaving the game with him, because I was at game one of the series, and I was talking about how, everything went right for this team last year, where this year it feels like everything is going wrong. Because last year we talked about this on the podcast as well, where Harrison Bader in the first half did really good in center field. The second half they end up getting good production from Tyrone Taylor to carry the rest of the year from that. When Lindor got hurt last year, what happened? Luis Angel Acuna came here and scorched the cover off the ball and pretty much gave you similar production to what you would have got from Lindor. Like, without an exaggeration there, that's how good Acuna was last year. JD Martinez, he started to look like Unk by the end of the year, right? He started to look wash. Well, what happened? Jesse Winker picked up the slack and ended up having a good run late September going into the playoffs, and you formulated your void there. This year, though, you add Juan Soto to the mix, and somehow this team offensively has none of that fight back that they had last year, none of that urgency. Great, if you want to call it, I don't know what you want to call it, but I can't understand what is so different from last year to this year outside of JD Martinez playing pickleball now and Jose Iglesias not singing his song here anymore. Like, what is so different? That is it because there's expectations out? And if that's the case, then you might as well just end this thing this offseason. And I'm not exaggerating that. If that's really what it is, you need to seriously reassess this group that you have and go with a retool. Because what are we doing here if these guys cannot handle the expectations of winning 90 plus games in a regular season? They're not winning a World Series then. Like, you are not winning a World Series with that kind of group, as you're alluding to, with the soft mentality. I just, again, I can't understand what is so different. And then, even like you said with Mendoza, why is it that there are so many managerial decisions this year where you're scratching your head, where last year it felt like everything fell into place with the manager, and it felt like he had way more of a feel last year with what's going on? Is it just because everything went right? Like, I don't understand what it is. And then just quickly back to your Sproat McLean thing. I think it's going to be Sproat. And I'll give you why. In July, if you look at the numbers in 5 games, he has a .67 ERA. He has a .81 WHIP, 11 strikeouts per 9 in that span. Sproat has been just dominant over the recent stretch, where McLean, he's been fine. I mean, he had that one reliever outing that really, or sorry, he had a couple of reliever outings that really ruined his ERA in total. Because as a starter, he has a 2.18 ERA. So you could go either way, but I think they would lean towards Sproat. And just to address this comment, I kind of think we're there though, because Sproat's been going like 5 innings consistently in his minor league outings, and McLean has been going like 6 innings in his outing. So I kind of think we're there already.
Yeah, listen, like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see who out of the two they called up. Like, I agree with you. I think it's Sproat that they lean to more. But listen, like I said, I'd rather if Spro if one of the two comes up here and they don't exactly hit the ground running and they struggle a little bit. Like I said, I'd rather see them struggle because at least it's a learning experience for them than watching Montas go out there and toss meatballs down the middle and pretty much throw glorified batting practice all game. Like, it's it's not even a comparison. At least I could be excited to go to the ballpark and watch either Sproat or McLean take the mound at Citi Field and pitch. There is no excitement when you go out there and you're willingly paying money to go watch Frankie Montas
Those
throw
poor
glorified
souls that did
BP.
that yesterday.
It's terrible.
Um, but yeah, just like back to the point where it's like, again, if you can't mentally handle this, then I don't know what we're doing here with these group of players. Like, you have to seriously consider an overhaul then in the offseason of what you have. If last year, again, and I hate to continue to compare it to the Rangers, and I hate to continue to compare it to hockey, but it's like last year felt so similar to what they did their first year of going to the Final Four, where it's like, you know, even though things just went their way, they showed so much more fight. And it's like now you build on this and you should be mentally stronger. And then it just seems like everything unraveled with that group. The same thing is happening here. Like that's what's driving me insane. It's the parallels are just unbelievable where it's like you should be stronger from what you did last year. You took the Dodgers who won the World Series to 6 games. You arguably gave them their best fight, at least, close to the Padres, if you want to say argue the Padres put up a better fight. You gave the Dodgers one of their toughest challenges of the postseason. You should be building on that with again adding Juan Soto. But now, nope. It's just not happening.
Yeah, and listen, I'll still give this team at least a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that at the end of the day, it is a coaching problem because even like it's clear, and again, we've stated this before. Chavez is a huge problem, and listen, I know there's people out there saying, "Oh, but the hitting coach, it's not really that important." At the end of the day, the players need to go out there and hit themselves. Shut the fuck up. Yes, the hitting coach is important because if he's not, then why does every team employ one to begin with? If they weren't important, then you're just wasting money at that point. Like, why spend money on a position that's not important? So, and listen, like we've talked about this before, just getting rid of Chavez is not going to fix the whole problem in the snap of a finger. It's not because even the Texas Rangers, while they've been better, their offense is exactly not still to the point of like dominant from when they fired their hitting coach. But you know what? At least you cut out the cancer. And then, sure, will it take some time to fully adjust and get a new guy in, implement their philosophy? Yes, absolutely. But then you have the benefit of adding other players who match that philosophy, who can actually hit the fastball and actually look to attack in the zone and crush fastballs and actually hit home runs and not just hit balls on the ground and hit balls to the opposite field. So like I said, I'm willing to give this team at least the benefit of the doubt in terms of just I think coaching because coaching has been a huge problem and we've seen it. Offensively, they haven't been the same, or at least they haven't been as good as last year. Defensively, they've had a good a couple good defensive series here and there, but for the most part, defensively they haven't been as good as they were last year, and even managerial wise. Listen, I like Mendoza as a person. But we can all sit here and agree that Mendoza hasn't had a great year this year in terms of managerial decisions, especially when you compare it to last year. And listen, this is because I'm pretty sure they're going to make the postseason unless they have like an '07 type collapse, which I mean, listen, it could happen. Sure, absolutely. I don't think it's going to happen, but this is going to be a big challenge for Mendoza this year in the postseason because last year when he got the NLCS, he got outmanaged heavily by Dave Roberts. And like you said, like last year, pretty much everything went well for Mendoza, apart from that NLCS, and it seems like it's carried over into this year. If Mendoza gets outmanaged heavily again in the playoffs, like again, there needs to be questions asked about him and about his job security. But listen, we'll get to that. We'll get to the point when we cross that bridge. But if this team doesn't win a World Series or at least make a deep run, like to the World Series, there needs to be questions asked. And then obviously that's going to be David Stearns's, problem, when we get to the offseason. But like I said, there's still a long way to go. It's only August 4th, but there are some concerns here about this group that I don't like.
Before I build on what you said, we have news that the Mets made their daily transaction. Dom Hamill is the call up here for Austin Warren. So thank you for your services, Austin Warren, who probably deserves to be here over Ryan Stanek after the way that went the other day. But Dom Hamill will be making his major league debut. It looks like probably tonight because again, I've talked about this at times with Mendoza where it seems like he thinks there's a rule that you have to use the pitcher that's first called up, the first day that he's called up. So I'm sure we'll see him tonight. But just to go back to your point, I don't know, and yeah, I don't understand why Hamill's the call up either. Uh, but again, I'm not even
Yeah, I'm
surprised anymore.
shocked. Yeah, I'm shocked it's not Davinsky.
That's what I thought it was going to be. Yeah, I guess they just wanted to go with Hamill, so then they could just option him after they use him. And at this point, I mean, Hamill should only be used in a blowout scenario because of how many other good relievers you have. I mean, him and Stanek are the only bad relievers now. Whatever. I digress. I can't sit here though for certain, just to go back to your point before, and say that it is a lock that they're going to make the playoffs. Because when you look at the schedule coming up, August is relatively split on the remainder of it, I should say, of the teams that they face. Like Cleveland, you should be beating them. You should be beating the Braves at this rate, considering how bad they've been. But the Braves are also always a pain in the Mets' ass. So I can't sit here for certain and say they're going to win those games. But you face teams like the Mariners, the Brewers, the Phillies, and I have to sit here and say that the Marlins, a 4-game series against them could be tough given what the Marlins have been doing over the past few weeks. You play the Tigers, you play the Phillies for a 4-game series. You play the Rangers, who are in a playoff chase right now. You play the Padres, who just spanked you this past week. You play the Marlins again. You play the Cubs. So there are a lot of tough opponents down the stretch here. And given the way this team's playing, I don't know if I could sit here for certain and say this team's gonna make the playoffs. And that might be reactionary, and I'll admit that, but unless something drastic changes and like one of these kids they call up just lights the world on fire, starting pitching wise, and the offense gives some semi decent production for once, which again we're in August, so that's not gonna happen. We know who they are. Um, Unless that happens, I don't know because they have the 6 hardest schedule remaining, but it's a lot of teams that are at or above 500. They should be able to beat everyone, and I agree that given what this Mets team's expected to be, they should. But will they? I can't sit here for certain and say they will. But that's just me.
Yeah, well, listen, I do agree. There's no, what's it called? There's no necessarily that they're going to just make it, but I don't know. I still think they'll figure a way out to make it. Like I think what they have like 60 something wins, 62 wins. I think they'll probably
63.
yeah 63. I think they'll get enough to make it. And listen, if they don't, then then we have a huge problem. But I think they'll get in, and then depending how far they actually go, that's another story. But I think they'll find a way to make it.
I mean, if they don't, then a lot of things have to change this offseason. That's for damn sure. But I just want to pull up some more comments just because we haven't got to them. We didn't even get to the series breakdown game by game, but honestly, I think we tackled the series as a whole. And just this is more of an episode where we need to talk about the state of the team above anything else because it's just, it's horrible where we're at. And D saying here that Chavez is embarrassing almost ruined Alvarez. And we've seen Alvarez look like one of the better hitters since he's been called back up. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. And I mean, I agree with this as well. Like we talked about Lindor as captain for so long. No one's showing me any signs of leadership right now in this clubhouse. Unfortunately not. And yeah, this is similar to what Matt was saying before. Rather see Sproat McLean suck than Montas suck because at least they're getting MLB experience. Montas is just stealing checks. I don't disagree. And I said in the post game yesterday, I genuinely can't envision a world where either of those two are worse. Like there's actually no way of being worse than what Montas is giving you.
Yeah, I mean that third game yesterday was just it was a tough watch because you just come off a huge offensive outburst. You put up 12 plus runs. You're like, okay, first loss sucked, but you got the win back. At least now, win this third game, win the series, kind of, what's it called, stabilize a little bit after getting swept against the Padres, and then go into a series against Cleveland. And listen, I'll be honest. At least Montas, for me, he started that game at least semi decent because the first two innings he went through, and he only got through it with 34 pitches. So at least, I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, like he's had two decent innings. He's at a relatively low pitch count. Maybe Montas could give you 6 innings, and then we saw it just in the third inning how it completely unraveled. Base hit, stolen base, ball gets past Lindor, ends up going to third, and then couple guys get on base, and then he just throws an absolute fucking meatball to Rafael Devers down the middle. Like I don't think he could throw a ball more down the middle than he did to Rafael Devers. And right off the bat, I mean, I knew you knew Alvarez knew like that shit was gone right off the bat, and it's just like, and then it sucked even more, right? Because they're down 7-1. And I'm going to commend Austin Warren here because Austin Warren comes in when they're down 7-1, and he could have easily, folded, gave up 3-4 runs in his outing, and just let the game completely get away. But to Austin Warren's credit, he goes out there, he gives you 4 scoreless innings, and if this offense had any semblance of consistency, they could have fought back actually because again, Warren kept them in the game with 4 scoreless innings, and listen, it sucks that Warren's going to get sent down now because he actually did his job yesterday. And, certain people would say that he played the game the right way, and he certainly did. I mean, he went out there, listen, like I said, he kept them in the game. And it's just, again, it's like the fact that I'm seeing, these guys they're getting sent down like him, Garcia over Ryan Stanek, which it seems like every time he goes out there, it's every single time. It's a 30-pitch inning. He can't get any swing and miss stuff on his fastball, not getting any swing and miss stuff on his splitter, and it's just constant people on base, runs coming in left, right, and center, and it's like, listen, I get that Ryan Stanks making $4.5 million a year, but we need to get to a point where he needs to get DFA'd because it's to a point now where it's like you can't trust him in any situation. I mean, you go into that game where they're already down, what, like I said, 7-2, and you're over here loading up the bases and giving up runs left, right, and center. I mean, if you can't even pitch in that situation, then how am I supposed to expect that you can pitch in a highly tight situation in a playoff game? Like, get out of here.
Because he did it last year. Because last year means so much for this year, as we could clearly see by this team entirely. It's so annoying. And Day's saying, are they trying to hide the pitchers until the playoffs? I mean, if that's the case, then that's stupid because, like we're talking about, it's not a guarantee you make the playoffs. And I just quickly calculated, because I went through Sproat's game logs just to see his ERA since May 25th, because the outing before that, he did not have a good one. He allowed 6 runs in that. So ever since that outing on, he has a 2.37 ERA, and that is over the course of, it was 53 innings. Yeah, 53 innings and a total of, I believe, over 10 games. So it's well enough of a sample size to know he's been pitching well enough lately. It's like, just call the kid up. That's all I could say.
And even then, with that point, of trying to hide their stuff into the playoffs, it doesn't make sense because if you want to throw these guys in, why the hell would you wait until the final month where there might be a situation where every single game is a must-win game? Like, why at that point would you throw them into that much of a pressure cooker situation where you have a couple big series against the Phillies, you have a big series against the Marlins, you're playing teams like the Tigers. Just call them up now in August. So at least, like, sure, is there a little bit of pressure right now? Yes, but it's not as much as if if they were playing in September where every single game matters. So call them up as early as possible, which, like I said, now it's the perfect time where, you just saw Montas, and I don't think Montas is going to have his next turn in rotation because even Mendoza yesterday, he had a question about that, and he pretty much dodged it completely. So I wouldn't expect we see Montas in this starting rotation like anytime soon at all, which is the right move because he's, like I said, he's glorified batting practice at this point.
I mean, Evan Roberts also, just to go back to what he was saying, made a very good case as well for why you should insert Sproat or McLean into Wednesday's game, because if you look at the schedule coming up, you have the Milwaukee Brewers, who I don't know if you've been paying attention, but besides them and the Marlins somehow, but the Brewers are the best team in the National League and have been playing that way for quite a bit now, playing some really hot baseball. So if you move David Peterson back to play the Brewers and then let one of these younger guys pitch against the Guardians, I think that benefits you for both this series and the Milwaukee series, because then I don't think Frankie Montas doesn't have to pitch that Milwaukee series at all. So I hope that that's what ends up happening. We'll see if it does. They might wait until the Milwaukee series, which I think would be stupid to throw them right into the fire there. But hopefully we see them on Wednesday, because I think that makes the most sense for not only, like I was saying, for the series now and letting these guys get less pressure, but also because you need to win these games against Milwaukee to potentially get the bye. And why not have your best pitcher from or your most consistent pitcher all year in David Peterson go out there against Milwaukee? To me, that makes more sense.
No, that does make the most sense. And at least if I was constructing the rotation that way, I mean, I would probably make that move because again, if you're calling up on a Sproat or McLean, again, why throw them into the fire right away? Like ease them in a little bit. And again, like okay, the Guardians they have at least a okay lineup. Like it's not like one of the worst lineups in baseball, but even then, just let them pitch that last game of the series against Cleveland, and save your most consistent starter this year, in David Pearson, for the tougher starting against the Brewers. Like to me, and like what you said, like that just makes the most sense. Because again, why throw McLean or Sproat into that tough game where that series could well decide if the Mets end up having a bye or not. If they make the playoffs. So and like you said, like I would save Peterson for that start. Just pitch McLean or Sproat in that final game of the Cleveland series.
Which, speaking of the pitching matchup and the Cleveland series, we'll talk about that before we wrap things up here. And since David Peterson is lined up as of right now, we'll have to talk about that. So for game one, it is Slade Ciccone versus Sean Manaea. That will be tonight at 7 o'clock. 5-4 on the year for Ciccone, 3.77 ERA, a 1.22 WHIP. Sean Manaea is 1-1 on the year with a 2.08 ERA and a 0.87 WHIP. Hopefully, Sean Manaea could give some much needed volume for this Mets starting pitching staff that has been starving for it. In game number two, we have Logan Allen versus Clay Holmes. Logan Allen is 7-9 on the year, a 4.06 ERA, a 1.36 WHIP. Clay Holmes, who is 9-6 on the year, the 3.45 ERA and a 1.32 WHIP. And then we have a little bit of an ace-off, though, in game three. Gavin Williams, 6-4 on the year with a 3.33 ERA and a 1.35 WHIP, versus David Peterson, who is 7-4 with a 2.83 ERA and a 1.24 WHIP. Maybe the way that the Mets go about if they insert Sproat or McLean in that third game is depending how the first two games go. I don't know. All I'll say is that I'm not even going to give a prediction. All I'll say is you better win 2 out of 3. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, they need to go out there. They need to win 2 out of 3. I mean, you're hoping at least tonight Manaea gives you some sort of length. At least if he doesn't go, at least if he doesn't give you the full complete 6 innings, at least pitch into the sixth. At least pitch into the sixth inning. Like I would at least take that out of Sean Manaea. And then with Clay Holmes, listen, I think we've gotten to a point with Clay Holmes where it's like, and now that you add into the fact that this bullpen is a lot deeper with the additions of Helsley, Rogers, and Gregory Soto from the deadline, at least with Clay Holmes, give me 5 innings and then get to that bullpen as early as possible, because at least we saw it benefit the Mets in the second game where, okay, Senga only goes 4 innings, but, a big reason why the Mets won the game was because, they could go to the bullpen early because they have that extra weaponry in the bullpen. So, like I said, with Manaea, at least pitch into the sixth inning. Holmes, give me at least 5 solid innings. And then, if depending on what happens in the final game, if Peterson goes or if, one of McLean or Sproat pitches that game, you got to win the game. At least for me, I'll say they win the first game tonight, lose the second game, win the finale, take 2 out of 3. Listen, I hope they sweep. Do I think they sweep? No, but at least 2 out of 3 minimum get back on track before this team heads out to Milwaukee, which is going to be a tough test.
Yeah, and like Brian is saying, I mean, this offense is it's Jose Ramirez and friends. So it would be great to see them be able to actually just again beat up on a team that they quite frankly should be beating up on. I'm trying to find right now the what the Mets pitching schedule looks like coming up to see if Sproat or McLean are lined up in any of these games. So far they have not announced a starter for tomorrow. They did not announce a starter for Wednesday as well. So or Thursday. I mean, that's something to monitor. They could end up calling one of these guys up since they haven't announced any starters for any of these games. We'll have to wait and see if that's the case, but uh that is something of note that I thought I would bring up. But I think that's really all we have to talk about here. Very frustrating that we have to sit here and do this. I feel like every other week at this point because this team they win 7 games in a row and then they lose 7 games in a row, erasing every bit of progress that they make. So let's hope that they could get on the right track, though, I guess, which I don't know what that will even do anymore because getting back on the right track still is not good enough.
Yeah, getting back on the right track just immediately gets followed up by going on another tough stretch, which again is just what this team has constantly showed us this year. But hey, prove us wrong, I guess, right?
Yep, that's all we could say. And that's going to be it for us. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your post notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on Met Central. And we'll see you guys in the next one.